Welcome back to the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. Now we switch gears in the conversation, and we did talk about this at the very beginning of the program, that we will have brutal honesty in terms of this conversation. And who else will take us on that particular journey than Nigeria's only Nobel laureate and elder statesman, as well as right icon himself, Professor Soyinka, who is joining us via Zoom. Prof, thank you so much for coming on the program. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, very well. We're super excited to have you on the program this early. And maybe my natural question will be, do you sometimes catch people feel conflicted in starting a conversation with you, given your very intimidating resume?
You had, you're talking about conversation with me in my residence.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's in studio or wherever, just having a live conversation, whether it's on TV or on radio, I mean, yes.
Yes, we're doing this by this difficult technology called Zoom. It's taken ages to set it up on my side. However, I'm glad we're in communication finally.
All right, so let's get this started. I know you did say a couple of things when you visited the president, but that's not where I really want to start from in terms of the things you propose and the things you told the president even before he ran for election. Let's start with you as a person, because a lot of young people are watching the program, and one of the things we try to do, Prof, is to walk through the journey of the persons like you who we see as national treasure and icon, all the way from where you started all the way to when you won the Nobel laureate in the Nobel Prize rather in 1986. So for persons who are looking at Professor Soyinka and saying, I want to get here someday and be celebrated the way he is celebrated, what are the things you will be telling that young person?
First of all, I think that it's an unwise ambition. Being celebrated comes with so many negatives. The most critical for me being almost constantly in a public eye. You lose your privacy to a large extent, anonymity. You lose even the faculty, the normal faculty of choices very often, because you've been expected here, you've been expected there. However, if you insist on being masochistic, I would just say, do find out what you think your aptitude is and pursue it no matter what. That's all I can say. That's what I've been doing, and I wonder whether it was the right thing to do. However, that's the only advice I had.
Well, Prof, good morning, sir. For me, I'd like to touch on your recent visit to the presidential villa, during which you told journalists that you would rather not criticize the president, and like your practice, you'd allow an administration to settle, for at least 1 year in office before you criticize the administration. But really, Prof, I'm going to follow up by asking about your relationship with the president. I'd like you to describe it. And do you think that your years in the trenches during the Nat'l years compels you to diplomacy rather than frankness in criticizing this particular administration, because it would seem like it's a departure from the norm where you're more vocal about past administrations?
One thing which bothers me, let me tell you frankly, what really distresses me is the way the press oversimplifies what one has said. It's a kind of selective simplification. You used the word, for instance, criticize. You said, I said I would not criticize the president the first year. No, the question which I was asked was assessment of the president. What do I think of the administration so far? And I said, I have a habit of not commenting. That's a holistic kind of experience, commenting on the administration during the first year. Let me remind you that during the time of Olusegun Obasanjo, during the international press conference in Abuja, it's amazing how history repeats itself. somebody said, oh, but we notice you have not been criticizing. That word is important. You've not been criticizing Olusegun Obasanjo. And the implication was, oh, Olusegun Obasanjo is your, tribesman, therefore you're not criticizing him. And I said, listen, during the first year, I tend not to attempt to assess the head of state because I know what they're coming into. And incidentally, a few days later, all those people saying I wasn't criticizing Obasanjo were now on top of me, bashing me, because I now issued a very strong criticism of him, because now it was time to open up. In addition, I wish to say this. It doesn't mean that I won't even open my mouth on critical issues. For instance, if tomorrow we find that another 200 plus, 300 plus children, pupils, have been abducted, obviously that's not too monumental an event for one to keep quiet about, not contribute something towards what one believes is a solution. So please, the press, I'm making this appeal to the press, don't oversimplify what one says, especially when in the retelling, it gets more and more simplified, then distorted. And in particular, I was very distressed by the neglect of one important issue, which I revealed to the press. And that was the continuing incarceration of a young citizen, Mubarak Bala, who was in prison, who's been in prison for last year. I asked myself, didn't the press think this far more important than a comment that I'm not prepared and will not make a holistic assessment of a government that is virtually new to the game? Nobody, the press, I didn't see it carried anywhere in there. Now, that bothers me. For me, this is far more critical than whether Wole Soyinka criticizes the press or not. Please, let's try and have a kind of, let me use that word again, holistic assessment of what one actually utters. Now, with that background, now I've lost the main thrust of your question because you asked the question at the end. And I wanted to get this off my chest first.
Well, I was wondering if your fondness of the president predisposes you to towing a more diplomatic path in assessing him now that you would rather wait, for 1 year and afterwards, because you use a fond word for him to describe him, Olori Kunkun, in reference to your appeal to him not to contest for presidency. So would you be frank in your criticism in the future, or would you be diplomatic?
Diplomatic immunity, temporary diplomatic immunity. Okay. First of all, Tinubu was a doughty fighter during the anti-Sonny Abacha struggle, and there's no way, as a human being, and as one with a sense of fairness, even in court, people says before they sentence a criminal to be hanged, they say, we're taking this and this into consideration. So we're not going to hang you 3 times, we just hang you once. So even the law recognizes the fact that somebody's record must always be taken into account before you descend on that person for some kind of neglect, criminality, failure, whatever. It's only human. However, I can never allow the past achievement of any individual to allow it to twist my appeal for any urgent issue. I cannot say because you were a fighter during the Nadeko-Nalikon struggle, therefore I will sit down and watch you condone corruption. That includes failures. For instance, when it is time, we're going to look at even those, for me, when it's my time, those in his government who should be under trial right now, and yet who occupy critical positions in the ruling party. There are issues like that I'm looking at. I'll be asking questions from EFCC. This and this individual who held this position, but who had immunity at the time, that person no longer has immunity. ICPC, EFCC What are you doing about them? What's happened? We've been waiting, immunity is out. So issues like that, numerous issues. If there's an opportunity, for instance, of dealing drastically with criminals, kidnappers, and so on, and the head of state fails, I'm not going to wait a year. That's assuming I'm around, because, as you know, I'm in and out. I work globally, and many people fail to take this into consideration. Once an issue is being tackled effectively, however, I don't believe in just talking for talking's sake, to say, oh, Wole Soyinka, yes, he's a consistent critic and so on. If Femi Falana or Boris Shade or anybody has already taken care of an issue effectively, why on earth, when I get back to the country, should I now poke my nose into it just to be seen as a critic? No, I'm not a critic for critics' sake.
All right, Prof. I'm tempted to always take you back because we could stay and talk for 3 hours because there's a lot you've said, documented in books and all of that. There's a lot when it comes to the hard sales as far as this is concerned. But I want to come on the softer side, Prof. You're going to be 90 in July, and that means 9 decades down the line, you've seen a lot. And I know some of your journey and adventure had gotten you into some trouble as a person. So, but in spite of whatever trouble you got you into, because I'm asking this question on behalf of young people before we go to the hard question, tough conversations, you've always stayed true to yourself, despite who Ox is God. I know that what you did in '65 with WMBS and all of that, well, you stay true to yourself. If you believe it, you go for it. So the question is, how did Professor Wole Soyinka stay true to himself? Even at 90, he's still not changing. He's still unwilling to change. He's still ready to go as hard as possible in spite of whose ox is God, because we need that kind of tenacity as young people and form of resilience.
Let's put it this way. I didn't set out to be what I am today. I assure you, beyond being a writer. Yes, at a certain stage, quite early, I felt that I had this vocation to be a writer and also to be a teacher. Never forget that. And if one, in the process, of course, I believe that I've created an informal family of fellow thinkers and fellow activists who take up the baton wherever possible, whenever they can. It's a collective responsibility, responding to societal ills, and I'm never considered, even though it looks like that in appearance, I never considered myself the burden bearer for an entirety. No, we all got to do it together. Now, that's what I also say to myself as I approach 90. Sometimes I ask, why haven't you learned to age gracefully? There's one thing I have not succeeded in doing. And by gracefully, I mean sitting down, putting your feet up, being looked after by your children and your grandchildren, and just letting the world go by. Occasionally, just instructing a small circle of pupils, or not disciples, the wrong word, but interlocutors. I enjoy that very much. I've been waiting, to feel 90. I waited to feel 80, I didn't feel it. I waited to feel 70, I didn't feel it. Before that, 60, I didn't feel anything. I feel just as I felt about half a decade ago. Now, whether that's a curse or a blessing, I don't know. I'm not really very sure. One thing I'm confident about is this, that society being dynamic by nature, society always has enough people to activate the positive virtues of society, what actually animates progress in society. And if even for a year, 5 years, 10 years, that aspect, that property of society seems to be squelched, I know that it has a tendency to resurface, and sometimes in the most dramatic, sudden ways. So I don't feel compelled to do anything, and at the same time, I will not refuse to do what I feel empowered to do, what I'm conscious of a necessity, a need. It's an instinct in me. I can't help it. That's the way I was born. As I keep saying, maybe it's something I drank as a child or ate when nobody was looking. I have no idea.
Prof, well, you describe yourself as an accidental burden bearer. Let me throw one burden for you, for young people. Since you won the Nobel Prize, as the only Nobel laureate in Nigeria, and a lot of young people look at you, will be wondering, are you worried that it's been that should be almost 40 years now, nobody has won from the country? Does it bother you, sir?
First of all, I think we have quite a fair, in fact, sometimes I think unfair size of candidates, qualifiers for the top prize, no matter what it is, in the arts. Nigeria is remarkably flooded with young talent. I always say this everywhere, and in particular from the female sector, where we're talking about literature now, right? In fact, I say to my young male colleagues sometimes, look out, these women, they are coming, they are beating you, they are knocking you flat. This is war of the sexes, so please, for heaven's sake, wake up. That way, there's healthy creative rivalry, which I enjoy watching. I have stacks and stacks of literary material, which I know I can't even go through. Of course, not all of that is of sterling quality. And that's something, by the way, that young writers should understand. The fact that you manage to get published once, sometimes self-published, doesn't mean that you are, a sterling writer. No, you just got to keep working and working. And hopefully, before 100, I'll be going to Stockholm to celebrate another Nigerian.
Yeah.
One more thing. Let's also think outside Nigeria. Let's think of the African continent. And which is my field, of course, is far beyond just Nigeria. Always remember that outside Nigeria, we also have remarkable competition. Whether you're talking about Kenya or South Africa, or you're talking about Dakar, there's marvelous material, artistic in all fields, coming out of the African continent. So don't try to force it. We're all just going to wake up one day and find that another Nigerian, another African, black African, because there are many kinds of Africans. I'm interested in the black race, mostly, principally. That then we'll all troop with our talking drums and go and invade Stockholm and give them some brightness in their cold, weary winter, which is when the prize is awarded.
Interesting. For me, Prof, even though you say you didn't feel it at 80, you didn't feel 60, you still don't feel anything even when 90 is approaching. I'd like to have my cognitive abilities intact as you do when I am 90, by the grace of God. That's a big credit to you, sir. Jeffrey talked about, some of the high points of your journey, as a nationalist that have gotten you into some form of troubles in the past. I'd like you to walk us through that, if you don't mind, Prof, particularly the records that we have on history about how you went to the Western Nigerian television, the defunct WNTV, to seize the station, demanding a recount of the Western Nigeria elections at the time, your arrest by the military. I'd like you to walk us through those high points. When you go down through memory lane, what was going through your mind at those times? And, at what cost did they come to you when you reflect on them personally?
Sometimes I describe myself also as a glutton for tranquility. In other words, I like to be at peace with myself. Now, how do I generate the conditions when I'm totally at peace with myself and I can do exactly what I want without feeling that negativities are breathing down my shoulders and suffocating me? It's only by tackling such negatives upfront, directly, frontally, dealing with it, then I feel an inner peace, inner tranquility. And so when you ask me, what was I thinking of at the time? I think basically I'm saying, if I don't do this, if I walk past this, I will not be at peace with myself. I think that's really what goes through my mind. Let me quote our late brother, Chinua Achebe, from one of his novels. That phrase always echoes in my mind. He says, in one of the characters says, if somebody comes and defecates in front of my house or on my doorstep, what do I do? Go back to sleep? No, he says, I take a stick and break his head. And I think it's that kind of temperament which I find I cannot subdue until I have actually acted in a rational, dignified way, which is to address the problem, which reduces me and others around me as human beings. So when people refer to, and in a book which I've just brought out, one of my, don't call it a book, it's one of my intervention series, I mentioned there that I wish people concentrated more, in fact, on actions that I failed to take. And I cited, for instance, during the critical years of Sani Abacha, when it was clear that we had a monster, a killer, a torturer on our hands. And it's a question of how should we get rid of them. So forget holding up a radio station, well, from which I was acquitted, by the way, so for me that didn't exist. Look at when we mobilized and planned a cross-country march on Aso Rock. People to come from all corners of the nation, Lagos, Maiduguri. We work with the Human Rights Association. Beck Oranzum-Kuti, by the way, let me take this opportunity to mention him. He was also pivotal to that particular exercise. And we liaised with teachers, with schools, with labor offices, and we were to march in concert, taking off at the same time. And we had the final organizing meeting at Mayflower School, Tai Sholari School. Tai Sholari was dead by then, but his widow, Sheila, marched with us. And when we were in this gymnasium, we met in the gymnasium, the kill and go plus military, they came there threatening, menacing, they sang war songs, circulating the gymnasium. We just ignored them, carried on with the planning. We had maps. We'd organized iron ration all over the country. We'd liaised. It was a very, very elaborate planning. And at the end of it, you know, they didn't raid us. They didn't march. They just threatened us. We then marched down Ikene streets with workers and market women defiantly. Well, when we got back, we were told we got messages, desperate messages from people like thinkers. I remember Pa Ajasing in particular, who begged us not to execute that march. They said, this man is a killer. He will mow down the various groups in isolation as they're marching down. Please just give it up. In addition, the SSS visited me with a letter from Aso Rock indicating the will, the decision of the Abacha's government to stop that march. He said, we will not stand by and allow chaos because other groups might come and attack you. Eventually, very painfully, we had to abandon that march. It is for me, one of the biggest defeats of my life. But I call attention to it. In relation because of what has happened during the last elections, when we told people, don't come out. Don't come out on behalf of a falsehood or an uncertainty, an imprecision of false, wild claims. Don't come out in the streets. And people always refer back to that incident of the radio station, as if it was just some wild gesture and say, well, you did this, why can't we do this? No. Always examine the situation very carefully.
All right, Prof. I said I know that the time will never be enough to talk to Professor Wole Soyinka. your thoughts, your interventions. I've always maintained. I read part of your history. A lot of people who read know that Professor Soyinka will go all out when he believes in something. And we've always said that some of these interventions get him into trouble, but he really doesn't care, because as far as he believes in it, it's going to happen. And you've had your 12th intervention called the Baiting Igbophobia, the Sunni Igbo thesis. And I want to read a portion of some of those straight talk, if you will. In your preface, you said, "I had long decreed a well-earned sabbatical from 2023 command performance. So what happened to the self-indulgent neutrality? Answer, nothing. It remained in place. However, something did take place that changed the axis of democratic contest. This was none other than the Sterling Dirty television show, as you called it, a persistent reminder it may pay the proponent of the democratic, in your words, new normal to pretend that Dirty interview was some isolated event. It is not, with capital N-O-T. Dirty, we repeat, did not perform in a vacuum. Banner bearers were already prominent formation outside military headquarters in Abuja, among other pressure points. That the national letter writer had also penned a directive to the presidency demand annulment of the electoral count was easily absorbed. Once the juicy irony of source has been squeezed out and enjoyed." Prof, what are you saying? I want you to... I just read that portion. And for those who get it, they get that direct interview, which was done on Channels Television. Who was blowing the trumpet behind the scene?
Well, we got to some nitty-gritties. An attempt was made to annul the election even before it took place. I'm sure you remember that. You remember statements by respectable people who, for reasons best known to them, were calling for an interim government. And of course, this was opposed. And no sooner was the election, the voting, let me put that, voting as opposed to election. No sooner was the voting over than we had a letter directed to the then president calling for the annulment of the results. Even before there was time for verification, annulment through further examination of papers and so on. In other words, I'm alleging that there was a conspiracy from the very beginning, before the elections, to make sure that elections did not take place, or that even if the voting did take place, that everything reverted back to what happened under Babangida, when we all just woke up and discovered that even though the results have been tabulated, even though the results were in possession of international bodies, including monitoring, embassies, and so on, even though we had the result, I was in Austria at the time, so was the Secretary General of the Commonwealth, we had the results directly, and suddenly it was annulled. History was about to repeat itself. Some people were determined to take us back to those old days. So for me, it was no longer a contest between individuals. It was not a contest between a so-called interim political party and democracy. And when you have a binary like that, I have no doubt, no hesitation at all about what side of the barricades my position should be. And that interview by Dati, that disgraceful, menacing interview, was for me the ultimate signal. Because this was somebody, calling for a rubbishing of a structure by which he himself had profited to ever become a governor. I'm talking about Peter Obi, who was what is known as a judgment governor. And even before he attended the tribunal at sat, his party, his spokesman, in this case Dati, came on television to threaten everyone, to threaten her if his interpretation of the results was not upheld. I mean, this for me was immoral, politically immoral, socially immoral. It was playing to a certain script. even if they didn't know it. That's very important. It was later that I began to express my suspicion that they were part of the script. At the beginning, I even thought, look at these poor fools. They don't see that they are playing to other people's script. What a pity. So at that time, hostilities were not yet so intense. So this is what I was referring to in that sometimes democracy leaves the stage of individual contest for power and then commences its own struggle for existence, for actualization. Democracy, as you and I understand it, you cannot accept judgments only when they favor you if you go by the same arbitration panel, the same arbitration structure. You cannot just say, I accept this only when it suits me. I mean, it is an insult to intelligence and to morality.
All right, Prof. The title of the book alone, Baiting Igbophobia, prompts one to ask that you clarify what baiting Igbophobia is. But we've totally run out of time. I want to thank you very much, Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka, for your time. This rare privilege to have you on the program, and we look forward to yet another opportunity when we can explore this book as thoroughly as possible. Thank you very much, sir, for being on the program. Jeffrey?
So, Prof, today we just wanted to know you a little more beyond what has been written and said. Maybe you have to promise us that when we call you again for more State of the Nation conversation, you will come. Prof, we need you to make that promise to us on the morning brief. Will you come?
We need that commitment.
We need that commitment from you, because there's a lot of questions we want to ask. 2 hours is not even enough. Will you come, sir?
Yes, anytime. Call me.
Fantastic.
As long as I'm not taught on a walking stick.
No, you will not. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you, Professor Wole Soyinka, elder statesman, right icon, Nigeria's only Nobel laureate. He said he's hoping that one day another person will join that in terms of resume, as well as the very first African to win the Nobel Prize. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on the program.
Welcome. Thank you.
Bukola, there's a lot to talk about when you have Prof in the studio. But
absolutely.
Well, we don't have so much time to talk about this, but let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. Join us again.
Quite a conversation with Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka. But let's take a look at what you're saying on X, on WhatsApp, and the rest. Well, top on that list, of course, is the situation in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital. And Zedman says, my prayers and thoughts are with Ibadan explosion people. That's how the person captions it. May the souls of departed ones rest in peace, and grant those who are injured quick recovery. God avert future occurrences of such an incident, he says.
And this is coming from Dapo Banjo. The security situation in Abuja needs to be addressed. We cannot be a nation where kidnappers go to a place and pick up people, then go back to dump dead bodies close to the area. It's too bracing.
This one is from...
Brazen, I guess he wanted to say. It's too brazen, he wanted to say.
Yeah. This one is from Olagunju Oladele. He says, disturbed by the Ibadan explosion, I've observed a lack of safety measures and emergency plans in many facilities witnessed a tragic incident at Oshodi Terminal, looking at the urgent need for proper response in transport hubs where we have thousands of commuters. Hashtag CTV Morning Brief.
We have a lot of messages on WhatsApp as well, but just take one from Rufunjaru. Last we're going to take because of time. Says, I feel we're not yet ready to tackle the problem of insecurity in Nigeria. It's easier for people to sit in Abuja and paint a picture on what he calls preconceived analysis on security issue. He says the truth is that killing, kidnapping and ransom payment has become a new normal in Nigeria. And he says he was once a victim of kidnap. He or she. Olajide Precious, Rufunjoro, Abuja.
All right. Guys, that's it on the program for today. But I'm tempted to say we cannot leave this show without pointing to Kayade's shoe. Kayade's shoe. Kayade's shoe is...
Carry your shoes down.
Kayade's shoe is given. Kayade's shoe is given today on the show. I'm Jeffrey Ozonga.
Thank you so much for being a part of the show. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka.
I'm going to give a director and producer a heart attack. Well, I'm Kayode. We're going to run Sunrise Daily is next. Thank you for being a part. Goodbye.
Goodbye.